Challenger!
Hey, Frog Prince Rana here, and thank you for dropping by. For us who likes to point out and debunk flat earth stupidity, after a while we notice a pattern. That is, repeat and rehashing of the same thing that has been debunked over and over again. It would either be some photograph that is heavily refracted or quite easily explainable, like the Isle of Man, Chicago skyline, Black Swan, and such. Then there would be experiments to draw a wrong conclusion from, and not to mention bringing on ancient books with known and deliberate lies. But once in a while, something new would come around, and that would get passed on between all the Flat Earthers channel. Today, we look at such a video. Now, this might also be an old egg, but it is new to me, and it is to do with sonar. Yes, you heard me right, sonar. You might be thinking, what does sonar have to do with flat earth? Well, fear not. I believe it was Taboo Conspiracy who first released this video titled No Acoustic Globe Shadow, the Sonar Proof of the Flat Earth. Let's have a look, shall we?
During the Gulf War, I was in the Navy. I enlisted as a sonar technician ground, which means that I was on the surface of the water hunting for submarines from a ship. It could be a number of different ships. I was more trained on the equipment versus the vessel that I was on. I went to boot camp in San Diego there, and then I went to A school for when you learn about sonar acoustics. I did that schooling for 4 months. And then before I was released, I was activated. I had enlisted as a reservist for college, and I was activated. So I spent almost a year on active duty, stationed in California, though. I never actually was deployed anywhere. And during that time, we learned about how to use the sonar dome and all the equipment associated with sonar, which is pretty diverse.
Now, this is a serious question for all flat earthers. You guys deny every single academic, researchers, and you call them shills. You bring out NASA, even though they have only existed for 62 years, whereas the earliest documented mention of the spherical Earth concept dates from around the 5th century BC, when it was mentioned by ancient Greek philosophers. And then you jump to anyone who parrots the same bullshit you guys do, even if it's from someone with no practical experience and have himself admitted of not being deployed anywhere and studied sonar for 4 months. This is what we call confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. People tend to unconsciously select information that supports their views, but ignoring non-supportive information.
During my time in the Navy, it never once occurred to me that there could be any other possibility that we would have to have lived on a ball Earth. So it wasn't in the purview of anyone around me. It was just never even something ever talked about. There's nothing in the literature that I read that told me one way or the other, but in hindsight, this is all in hindsight. It's only when I look back that I can tell you that everything that we've done to measure sound, everything that we do right now in the open market, things that I can talk about, the actual passive acoustic equipment that's available or the active sonar equipment that's available, all of them do rely on the concept of a flat Earth, even though they don't explicitly say that.
Now, before going any further, maybe we should talk about Sonar Technology, what it does, how it does it, and so on. Bear in mind that there is quite a lot to go through to understand and debunk the claims made by this gentleman. This video is time-coded, so please feel free to jump through the chapters to get to the actual debunking if you get bored. To start with, I would like to group them in 2 categories. No, I will not group them as active and passive. Instead, I'll group them as warfare and non-warfare use. simply because, understandably, no government in their right mind would disclose technical specifications or limitations of the equipments used. That would fall under national security and would be classified. We will touch on that later, but to start with, let's focus on the non-warfare use. Sonar, short for sound navigation and ranging, is helpful for exploring and mapping the ocean because sound wave travels farther in the water than do radar and light waves. NOAA scientists primarily use sonar to develop nautical charts, locate underwater hazards for navigation, search for and map objects on the seafloor such as shipwrecks and map the seafloor itself. In military section, the primary purpose of sonar is to detect and attack other ships. Surface ships, aircraft and submarines all use sonar with other sensors to conduct anti-submarine warfare or ASW. Submarines also use sonar to contact anti-surface ship warfare or ASUW. Other uses of sonar include communications. The US Navy calls it an underwater telephone. NATO allies calls it Gertrude. Navigation, sound velocity measurements, and mine detection and classification. In civilian circuit, sound waves travel differently through fish than through water because a fish's air-filled swim bladder has a different density than seawater. The density difference allows the detection of schools of fishes by using reflected sound. Thus, nowadays, commercial fishing vessels rely almost completely on acoustic sonar and sounders to detect fish. We even use it to search for wreckage. For example, Bluefin 21 was deployed to help in the search for the flight MH370. Sonar functions very much like the echolocation method, which dolphins and bats use to navigate. The common form of sonar used, active sonar, requires a transmitter and a receiver for the sound waves. In principle, the transmitter emits sound waves which travel through the medium, which in the case of sonar is water, and bounces off the surrounding terrain. The receiver then receives these sound waves using the velocity that is roughly 4,600 to 5,100 feet per second in seawater and the time which the sound waves took to travel back. The computer program would then be able to calculate the distance between the sonar equipment and the obstruction of sound waves. By doing this frequently, the computer program is able to artificially construct the terrain ahead or underneath. Predecessors to such sonar was the British Allied Submarine Detection Investigation Committee or ASDIC system developed towards the end of World War I to detect submerged U-boats. Then we have passive sonar systems that are used primarily to detect noises from marine objects such as submarines or ships and marine animals like whales. Unlike active sonar, passive sonar does not emit its own signal, which is an advantage for military vessels that do not want to be found or for scientific missions that concentrate on quietly listening to the ocean. Rather, it only detects sound wave coming towards it. Passive sonar cannot measure the range of an object unless it is used in conjunction with other passive listening devices. Multiple passive sonar devices may allow for triangulation of a sound source. There is a third category of sonar devices is acoustic communication systems, which require a projector and receiver at both ends of the acoustic path. So now, as we covered a bird's eye view, let's dive into some details. The frequencies used by active sonar range from a few kilohertz and down to and below 1 kHz, and the active sonar can be hull mounted in a dome below the hull or a surface vessel, be hull mounted in a bow bulb on a surface vessel or a submarine, or be in a fish towed at variable depth behind a surface vessel. The performance of a hull-mounted sonar on a surface vessel is strongly dependent on the propagation conditions for its acoustic signals near the sea surface. In deeper waters, the negative sound velocity gradient causes downward friction of the signals and the formation of shadow zones, where submarines may hide. As the extent of the shadow zones decreases, when the operational depth of the sonar increases, a variable depth sonar or VDS is used. These are large transducers that are towed from a surface vessel on a cable with an adjustable scope. The reception of the returned signal from an underwater object can be received by the transmitter itself, by a towed array, or by one or more receivers at greater distance from the transmitter. A bistatic sonar system is a combination of an active system for transmission at one location and a passive system at another location for reception of the returned signal from the target. This combination limits the reverberation influence frequently found by a monostatic active sonar system. Instead of a single receiver in a bistatic sonar system, a multistatic sonar system will consist a net of receivers distributed over an area of interest, while the whole area is insonified with a powerful transmitter. The receivers may be sonobuoys with radio communication links to processing facilities on board the surface vessel carrying the transmitter. Multistatic sonar systems also provide effective Doppler processing, high precision in target position determination due to triangulation, fewer false alarms, and the anti-stealth effects by submarine hulls lined with anechoic coating is less efficient at low frequencies. Couple of things to clarify. First of all, sonar scans in cones, not lines. Sound travels in waves, not straight lines, and these waves expand in cones, getting wider and wider. Most sonars can control the range of the sound wave cone by changing the scanning beam frequency. Wide beam scanning, usually 40° to 60° angle, is good for quickly scanning large areas and getting overall information on depth and bottom structure, but the accuracy and detail will be lower. Wide beam scanning is best suited for shallower water because the cone covers a wider area the deeper it scans. Narrow beam scanning, around 10° to 20°, gives a more precise picture but covers a smaller area and is better suited for deeper water, as the cone does not spread as wide. Another factor to consider related to your sonar cone width is that in some cases you will not be able to detect objects just below the surface of the water. The cause of this is what's known as surface clutter, which is common to all sonars. Surface clutter appears because the water close to the surface will reflect some of the sonar waves, and these reflections are much too fast for the sonar to process correctly. This reflection has numerous causes, the most common being waves on the surface, bubbles, currents, and algae. The result is lots of sonar noise close to the surface. Finally, we have to touch on actual sonar propagation. Sonar systems rely heavily on operator input and control to maximize their performance. Many of the decisions made regarding the maneuvering of the ship carrying the sonar system will also affect the sonar's performance. Transmission loss can be predicted to a very rough degree, solely on the basis of a few factors. These factors are range and frequency. The simplest case, which is the identical case used in electro-optics and radar, is to assume all of the acoustic energies is uniformly distributed in all directions. In sonar, this is termed spherical spreading loss, since the intensity will fall off proportional to the surface area of a sphere. When the acoustic energy reaches either the surface or the bottom of the ocean, it is generally reflected back. A long-range, all of the acoustic energy will tend to confine between two planes, one at the surface and the other at the bottom. Therefore, the energy can no longer spread out like a spherical spreading case, but now becomes cylindrical spreading. Many other things can happen to the acoustic wave as it propagates. For example, the energy may scatter off particles or biologics. Energy will be lost upon reflection from the surface and bottom. And lastly, by but far the greatest factor of all, will be the change in the propagation due to the variations in the speed with temperature, depth, and salinity. The change in speed will tend to distort the perfect spherical or cylindrical shape of the wavefront. All of these factors can be lumped into a single term called the transmission loss anomaly. The change of propagation speed with depth will manifest itself through refraction of the sound. A graphical method of illustrating the effect is called ray tracing. The basic idea is to draw lines perpendicular to the wavefronts and follow their paths. As the rays go deeper, they begin to refract. As the rays moves into a medium, which has a slower propagation speed, they tend to become more vertical. On the whole, the rays will deflect downwards in a negative gradient. As you might expect, the opposite effect occurs when the gradient is positive. As the rays enter deeper water, the propagation speed increases and the rays bend upwards. The other common propagation modes occur during combinations of positive and negative gradients. A positive gradient over a negative gradient produces a special kind of propagation, where the rays split at the boundary, which is called the layer. The depth of maximum sound velocity which occurs on the layer is called the layer depth. Finally, the last type of propagation occurs in when the sound is strongly reflected from the ocean floor. The rays tends to converge near the surface, resulting in a reduced transmission loss. This is called bottom bounce propagation. Rays from bottom bounce can be identified from the others because of the large angle of incidence. Typical bottom bound comes into the sonar at angles of more than 30 degrees from horizontal. Now, I'm pretty sure that is more than enough about sonar. So what does that mean? Well, for active sonar, the lowest detection range is said to be about 1 mile, which obviously depends on the ship's speed, or if sound propagation condition bends the sound wave sharply down towards the bottom. The maximum distance would be around 30 miles under near perfect conditions, or if sound conditions refracted the sound into a convergence zone anomalous. Whereas passive sonar ranges depends on a large number of variables, such as how loud the object is. For example, it is zero noise for a motionless, non-nuclear submarine on the batteries, to extremely loud for the fastest submarine in the world, Soviet Alpha, at its maximum speed of 41 knots. Then the noise in the water, including ambient noise, natural noise like sea noise, seismic noise, weather noise, and such, biological noise from fish, crustaceans, whales, and dolphins, omnidirectional man-made noise, directional man-made noise towards shipping lane, oil platforms, self-noise, flow noise, solar system electric noise, propagation loss depending on frequency, directivity, and processing, which all leads to a lowest detection distance of 0. If it doesn't make any noise, you can't hear it. For a slow or hovering nuclear submarine, maybe a few hundred years to a few thousand. There is an old and not totally untrue joke was that the only thing limiting detection of an alpha submarine at high speed was when a continent gets in the way, as a fast and noisy submarine can be detected even thousands of miles away. Now to actual debunking. For the ocean, well, the average depth of the world's ocean is 3,790 meters. The outside water pressure increases with depth. Each 10 meters of depth puts another atmospheric or 1 bar of pressure. So at 300 meters, a submarine is withstanding 30 atmospheres of water pressure. And that is the depth a typical nuclear submarine would dive to. If it goes any deeper, well, we have crush depth or collapse depth, at which a submarine's hull is expected to collapse due to pressure. World War II German U-boats are said to have collapse depth in the range of 200 to 280 meters. We can obviously understand why this person is wrong. A nuclear submarine only ventures to 1/12 the depth of an average ocean depth. Now, even if I go with the wrong equation of 8 inches per mile square, and yes, it is wrong, I have a video detailing this to great details. Regardless, with a sub 100 miles away, that dumb equation gives us a so-called drop of 1.26 miles or about 2 kilometers, which is around 1.7 kilometer less than the average ocean depth. Let me rephrase. Suppose there were no refraction and we could see through the water all the way to the bottom. We have something on the sea floor, we would be able to see it from 135 kilometers away based on the wrong formula. But sound doesn't behave the same way as light. Earlier we saw how sonar propagates, and here it is water that is the medium. This is the reason we can pick up old Soviet subs from thousands of miles away. One more thing. Ensonified objects cast shadows on the background in the same manner as objects that are illuminated by a light source. Depending on the angle of the incident sound, the position of the target, and the angle and the position of the background, the shadow can reveal features of the object's shape in the dimension that is otherwise not resolved in the primary acoustic image, i.e., the image that is created by echoes reflected by the object itself. Volcanoes and other features that stick up above the surrounding seafloor will cast acoustic shadow. I thought I would mention it here as the original video tries to bring this acoustic shadow to try and prove that Earth is flat. Again, let's remember the depth of ocean and how far deep we can go.
So even assuming you could go down much further than that, still the math indicates that you would not have a vessel that you should be able to detect further than about 75 miles away.
Well, we have just seen that it is not correct.
In that interview, James, a former Navy sonar technician, said that modern sonar could monitor objects over 1,000 miles away, and that there was no ability for a submarine to hide behind a supposed curvature acoustic shadow. According to this article from the Daily Mail, a whale's song can be heard by another whale 4,000 miles away. A humpback whale singing in the Caribbean, for example, can be heard by a fellow whale off the west coast of Ireland more than 4,000 miles away.
Quick question. Did James mention if SOSUS have anything to do with it? The Sound Surveillance System, or SOSUS, was a passive sonar system developed by the United States Navy to track Soviet submarines. Let me backtrack. With the advent of submarine warfare and its impact on Allied forces and supply lines in World War II, the need for timely detection of undersea threats was made a high priority in anti-submarine warfare. Since the early 1950s, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans have been under the vigilance of SOSUS, with long acoustic sensors or hydrophones were installed across the ocean bottom at key locations. By the end of 1998, the Short Signal Information Processing Segment, or SISIPS, and Surveillance Direction System, or SDS, had been installed at all shore facilities, giving SOSUS a common equipment configuration and significantly reducing system infrastructure support cost. With the development of quieter submarines and counter tactics to evade SOSUS, newer technologies have been implemented over the years to keep up with the threat. Faster processors, higher capacity storage devices and cleaner code has enabled the advancement of the art of locating undersea threats. Currently, the Integrated Undersea Surveillance System, IUSS, uses all of these advancements in the Fixed Surveillance System, FSS, Fixed Distributed System, FDS, and the Advanced Deployable System, ADS. With the end of the Cold War, some of the areas have been closed down, including Bermuda, Adak, and Keflavik. SOSUS in the North Pacific is currently being analyzed for low-frequency vocalization from marine mammals living in the open ocean. Finally, as for the whales, sound is traveling through the medium water. So even if there is a great obstruction in the way, it would bounce off that obstruction and not dissipate. So what is the point you're making here?
Checking the curvature drop on engineering software. Yes, this is verified by AutoCAD. The curvature drop at 4,000 miles is 1,669 miles. A target hidden height of 1,669 miles. That's one huge acoustic shadow. The accuracy of the alleged target hidden height is confirmed by this Earth curvature calculator as well. So don't come onto my channel and lie claiming that we flat earthers got the math wrong.
Well, the math may not be wrong, but your conclusion sure is. Quick question. Have you ever heard a sound without having a direct line of sight? I can hear my neighbor's lawnmower even when he is mowing the farther side away from my house, meaning we have his house in between. Any idea why that works? According to your understanding, I shouldn't be able to hear it, right? Remaining of the original video is just fluff with previously debunked claims including Marconi's transatlantic radio transmission, where instead of a blind test, receiver knew the symbol S, in this case being transmitted with no recorded log of when the sound is transmitted and when it was received, but that would be its own video. Another long video. One of these days, I will just keep explaining the basic and just go for the jugular. But if you did manage to stick till the end, well, you are a star, and thank you for that. Hopefully you have picked up some information regarding sonar, and now can call this sonar claim and flat earth being the bullshit it is. If you have enjoyed this content, please drop a like, comment, and share it around like the flat earthers do. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. It would help me bring more content to you. Thank you once again. Wherever you are, have a safe day. Signing off.